This half of their style is going to be a little different. I will still be sitting. Sometimes I might even be sitting when I start singing. But I'm not going to be talking after this. Dr. Tanis, being the amazingly beautiful soul, wonderfully knowledgeable scholar, and kind teacher, is going to share with you his information about Richard Strauss, who is, well, the focus of much of Dr. Tanis' research is specifically the vocal works by Strauss for voice and piano and voice and more often orchestra. Because just as an FYI, none of these pieces were composed for piano. These are all orchestral reductions is what it's called. Meaning that Dr. Tanis is playing what an entire, for this composer, 80 to 100 piece orchestra? Yeah, 80 to 100 piece orchestra would be playing. Dr. Tanis is doing all the rest. So he's going to share some of his vast information with us on these songs. Because like I said, they're his focus of his research. The translations of these songs, Dr. Tanis has also graciously offered to share with you. They are not the ones that are in your program. The ones that are in your program are my, mostly, word-for-word literal translations, meaning that they're going to read a little strange. Word order is going to be off. Dr. Tanis is going to read a man called Richard Stokes, who is Oxford's translations of these songs, and they're some of the favorite translations by most people. So, as I said, Dr. Tanis is quite a scholar on music, and I lost my page. I'm really good at this game, aren't I? So, I don't have anything else to say. Dr. Tanis, thank you.
We'll hear in the second half of the program all four of Richard Strauss's four last songs, which I think are quite appropriately named because they were, in fact, the last four songs he composed before he passed away. There has been some edits to these songs that were made after his passing by knowledgeable scholars and contemporaries of his at the time. I won't bore you with those details, but I think that they are appropriately named as his four last songs. Maybe something that I might just mention before we begin is that the ordering of the four songs was not ever set in stone by the composer, and different performers have played around with the ordering of these songs. Most notably, the very famous soprano Kirsten Flagstad solidified the order of these pieces. It's the order that we'll take this afternoon. What really hasn't been argued is that the last of the four songs that we will perform today, Im Abendrot, is always performed as the last of the four. That one has never been moved up in the cycle of four songs. However, it was the first of the four that Strauss composed, but we will perform it last as has been historical tradition. We'll start with his song Beim Schlafengehn, which translates loosely to upon going to sleep or time to sleep. And I'll read you the poetry now. This is the English translation. Now the day has made me weary. Let the starry night gather up my ardent longings lovingly, as it would a tired child. Hands, leave all your toil. Mind, put aside all your thoughts. All my senses long to settle now into slumber. And the soul, unencumbered, wants to soar in free flight into night's magic realm, to live deeply 1,000-fold.
like to see if I can do just a little better. So can we do it from F or just before F? Thank you.
It's actually my favorite part of playing too, so Any questions?
Yes, I do. How in the world does one take the complexity of a piece written for orchestra and distill it like that? It just seems like it couldn't work.
That's a wonderful question. I think the jury's out on the ways that one might approach it. And in fact, of the 4 songs that we'll hear this afternoon, there are 2 different arrangers who have taken the full orchestral score and put together what we have here at the piano. It's pretty accurate in terms of tracing a one-to-one mapping of what all of the different instruments in the orchestra would play to what's being played at the piano. Now, the other conceit from a performer's perspective is that sometimes the entire orchestral score is just impossible to play. You don't have enough fingers, you don't have enough hands, you don't even have enough notes within range to make all of the instruments sing. So there's a little bit of liberty in that case too. But I actually think it's a wonderful art and it's a great business to be in. There are people who are paid to take orchestral scores and to reduce them for the piano, since, let's face it, it's very difficult to get an entire orchestra to perform with, and it becomes a very expensive thing too, in order to have an entire orchestra. So thank you for your question. It's a little daunting sometimes to approach pieces like this that were not initially conceived for the piano, because even if one can play all of the notes, it may not feel particularly comfortable or idiomatic under the hands. So one has to balance these things in performance. And in fact, this was one of my little bullet points here on my notes. I feel like I get to teach a class, which is great. I had mentioned that there are 2 different arrangers who worked on the piano arrangement of the orchestral score that we're hearing today. I might also mention that we will be hearing the poetry of 2 different poets. The first 3 songs that we hear are poetry by the German poet Hermann Hesse, and the final song that we will hear features poetry by another German poet, Eichendorff. So We'll hear that poetry in just a little bit, but for now I thought I might read to you the translation of the next song in order, September. The garden mourns, the cooling rain falls upon the flowers. The summer shudders silently, fading into its end. Leaf after golden leaf drops down from the high acacia tree. Summer, surprised and weak, smiles at the fading garden dream. Yet he lingers still among the roses, yearning for rest. Slowly, he closes his weary eyes. This is September. Very different sounding music than the first half of the program, isn't it? In a lot of different ways. Yeah. It really, Richard Strauss was composing at the height of the Romantic era and used in a lot of ways, used very experimental harmonies in some of his writing. A lot of it is quite tuneful. I think Dr. Hartford sings it particularly beautifully. I might just mention, we talked a little bit about the difficulty of playing all of the members of the orchestra at the piano, but I would really like to point out, too, the difficulty of singing these long lines that the composer has composed for singer, where seemingly one just can't run out of air, because the singer's line goes on forever and ever and ever and ever. And in fact, it's one of the things that the composer became known for among singers. Not everyone can perform this music for these reasons. So there are some performance constraints on the body that make
Well,
this
and
difficult.
just to follow on what Dr. Tanis is saying, oh my goodness, I was going over my music again, because I've known this for 20 plus years too. And there are, seriously, one syllable of one word is an entire page of music. One syllable.
It's true.
Yeah, it's crazy.
The next song that we'll hear is Frühling, Spring, as it translates to English. This is oftentimes the first of the four last songs that people choose to perform first. We'll hear it third here. But before we do, and before I read the poetry to you, I might just let you in on some of the inside details of the composer's life. Richard Strauss was known for composing very serious music, I would say, very beautiful music, but also he did not take himself as a person too seriously. If in your free time you have the opportunity to peruse YouTube, you may in fact find videos of the composers conducting an entire orchestra, performing his own work, looking quite uninterested, removing his pocket watch and wondering when it would be time to play cards with his friends, rather than actually conducting the music. This is a true part of his biography. He took his work as a composer very seriously, but he did not take himself as a person very seriously. And I think some of the playful nature of his personality can be heard in his music too. In fact, I'll encourage you to think a little bit about that playfulness in the next piece that we perform. I might just say in conclusion here, this is probably the most demanding of the four last songs for the singer and the pianist. This one just keeps unraveling through time, the entire time. I think you'll feel that it's rather endless until we reach the last page of music. Here's the translation of the poetry. Spring. In dusk-dim vaults, I've long dreamed of your trees and blue skies, of your fragrance and bird song. Now you are revealed glittering, adorned, bathed in light, like a miracle before me. You know me once again, you beckon to me tenderly. Your blessed presence sets all my limbs trembling. That is spring.
Thank you. Dr. Tanis and I have been rehearsing this one a lot, and he's pretty pleased with how this one went as a whole.
Did you feel how endless that one was from beginning to end? Very, very few moments of reprieve in that one. It's quite the accordion. An awful lot of music to sing through. Very beautiful. Well, you know, I get so excited to talk about Richard Strauss that I have completely ignored asking you if you have any questions. So, any questions, please?
Well, I'm glad you brought up that about, I don't know, what is it called? That wasn't my question.
Oh, yeah, the score here. The score, yeah.
So we see you like flipping the pages and following along.
Yeah.
Have you thought about, what are your thoughts on like the digital scroll? Like how would that impact what you do?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. This is becoming very popular nowadays where pianists will put an iPad up on the music stand of the piano rather than working from hard copy. You know, I think I'm an old soul by nature. I'm trying to get there, but I have heard really many stories of the black screen of death where the iPad dies mid-performance. This happened to a friend of mine who was giving a little recital at Carnegie Hall, and the iPad just died, and the music was gone. But I will say something else that I think is very beautiful about how music is printed on the page. If I can at least have a number of the very many pages up in front of me before having to make a page turn, I really love being able to allow my eyes to scan ahead a little bit. I feel so much better about knowing what's upcoming than wondering what happens when I tap the iPad and the next page of music comes up. So it is very popular. All of my students at the university seem to do this, and they ask me all the time why I'm still using 2 tin cans and a string versus a telephone.
It works.
But it works. And I also enjoy, on the hard copy of the music, I enjoy marking the music. Dr. Hartford and I had long conversations about how do you mark music? Do you use different colors, for example, to draw your eyes to something of importance along the way? There are different schools of thought. But anyway, thank you for asking about that. And maybe the last thing I'll say about that, it can be very difficult sometimes to find a good, dependable page turner if you have someone assisting you. Because, you know, if they turn one page too far, that can be quite chaotic and stressful. If they're not following the music, etc. So there are so many different factors that can come up. If I can turn and I miss a turn, I can only blame myself. So it makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. Thank you for asking. Other questions?
That is an awesome question.
That was a great question. My goodness.
Very interested in the answer.
The practicality of singing. Have you ever used an iPad for your music?
I'm going to sound like a snob here. I would never do that. I know that my voice teacher in New York, she's working. She uses an iPad. I've heard horror stories of hers where it doesn't come on, it's not charged. I'm sorry, my paper music has served me well. I will always use paper music. I don't really understand why anyone wouldn't who actually wants to be an artist that doesn't have to, if you don't have to have everything memorized ahead of time, I don't understand why you wouldn't have your music in front of you, your physical music. I've heard that orchestras, some are even starting to do it. I've heard horror stories that it doesn't work. So maybe if it becomes more reliable, but I wouldn't trust the battery. I mean, that's the very simple thing. And my music, Josh was talking about color. My music is marked up with color, which I've never done before. But I thought I would be using it more because I was very nervous about this today with the brain injury that I would forget or get lost. That happens a lot. I'm not today, so that's a good thing. But I can't imagine not having the music in front of me and having to rely. I mean, I love technology. I would never, ever do it that way. Yeah, ever. And I have to have my stuff memorized. I do, obviously, have everything memorized. I worried that it wasn't where it needed to be. But I would never give them my paper music.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Thank you again for the question. It's certainly a very kind of timely and present question these days. Well, we're at the last song of the 4 last songs. This one is titled Im Abendrot, or At Sunset. This song, as I mentioned earlier, was the first of the four that the composer composed just before his passing. And I think this song takes us through a journey of what the composer experienced in his own life. Richard Strauss's father, who was a wonderful horn player, was very indebted to the classical style. So if we think of the height of the music of maybe Mozart, for example, or of Beethoven, or of Haydn, just to name some composers, familiar composers from the classical era, Richard Strauss's family was quite indebted to the classical era, and we heard a lot of the strictness of the classical style in his composition. But then, as composers often do, they become a little bit more adventurous and experimental in the middle of their life. Some composers are experimental in their compositions all the way through to the end of their life, but Strauss was decidedly not. He came back to his classical roots at the end of his life, and I think we'll hear together the kind of ode to the classical era, and the crispness, the cleanness in the music in the final of these four last songs. So it takes us through a journey of all four of these songs put together, from a kind of strict style to more experimental. We heard very experimental, I would say, in the last song that we heard. And now we get back to something just a little more reserved in a lot of ways. So it's a cycle within these four songs, but it's also a cycle that marks the entirety of the composer's life. So I think it's very, very fitting that we might end with Im Abendrot. Here's the poetry. Through pain and joy, we've traveled hand in hand. Let's rest from wandering now above the quiet land. Around us the valleys are waning, already the sky is darkening. Yet still two larks, dream-seeking and lovely, soar upward into the air. Step close and let the larks fly. It's nearly time for sleep, lest we lose our way in this solitude. O spacious, silent peace, so deep in evening's glow, how travel-weary we are. Could this perhaps be death? You'll notice throughout this song some trills, little figures in the upper register of the piano that mimic the larks.